Ecoa-PUC-Rio, Brasil Energia, Bratecc, and Visão TV bring the topic Trends on the Energy Sector with Decio Oddone, former General Director of ANP, National Oil and Gas Agency in Brazil. Thank you for accepting this café, Decio Oddone. Good evening.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Unfortunately, we cannot have the physical coffee, but virtually we are engaged.
Yeah, but soon we can program something different. Thank you.
Hopefully. And then you can give me another of those mugs.
yeah, you have two mugs. Yeah, that's great.
Looking forward for the third.
The third one. Okay, it's with me here, prepared for you.
For the ones who do not follow, every time Cavanha interviews someone, he gives him a mug saying coffee with Cavanha.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's very nice and very kind.
It's a good gift. Yeah, yeah. Decio, please look into the oil and gas upstream. It seems to have, in Brazil, we have everything in the country. I mean, huge reserves, legal and contract stability, a strong supply chain is a very strong one. In terms of regulation, what are the most important points you see that could be improved to encourage companies to keep them investing?
I think we have done the homework in Brazil during the past three years. I always remember that when we discovered the pre-salting about 10 years ago, we stopped the bidding rounds, we changed the system, we introduced the production sharing contracts, and that was not a very good idea at that time, and we have lost a lot of time in order to develop those very important reserves. But as I said, we did the homework. Petrobras is no longer the only company authorized to operate in the pre-salt as an operator. The pre-salt was open for foreign investors and private companies. We have changed the local content regulation. We established a bidding round calendar. We renewed the special regime for taxation of the investments in the oil and gas business. And we have now the permanent offer, the system in which companies can select which areas they will make an offer instead of the agency offering the blocks. So I think that the basics are there. What we did not expect is this new scenario, this new oil shock, let's call it this way, with this sharp reduction in pricing. What we are seeing now is a series of movements from companies reducing costs, postponing or reducing investments, and it may affect us. What we see is that pre-salt especially is very productive, very high productivity, very competitive in terms of cost. So I think the conditions are there for the investments to come, and I think we could, in order to help investments, optimize some of our taxation, the way we tax. Brazil tax very heavily in a very regressive regime. We charge a lot of taxes up front. Other countries, they charge profits. So I think that's a good idea for the future is to think about this type of taxation, because the technical discussions they were very fruitful. For the future, we still have the discussion between the concession and the production sharing regime. But I would say that the most important areas of the pre-salt, they were already assigned. So this discussion for the future, I think, is less relevant now.
And a permanent offer is something that is very huge for the north part of the country, but needs some kind of adjustment for regulations too.
The issue with the permanent offer, first is it takes time because we have to get the environmental approval for hundreds, thousands of blocks, and it takes time. But the agency was doing there when I was there, and I understand that there is a second group of blocks that will be offered now. The new idea that they were developing is to authorize companies to select which blocks to be prioritized in order to be included in the permanent offer. That would be a way to expedite offering of blocks in which companies are interested. But the most important part for me regarding the permanent offer is the pre-salt polygon, because we are not authorized to see any movement inside the pre-salt polygon except for bidding rounds in the production sharing regime. The end of 2018, the National Council for Energy Policy approved a resolution authorizing the offering of blocks inside the pre-salt polygon in the permanent offer, but it was never published, this resolution. So I hope when they do that, we will see movement in some of those areas in the neighborhood of those old and mature assets that Petrobras is selling now.
Yeah, great. And for returning to the pre-salt fields that have huge reserves and attractiveness is very high. I mean, CAPEX and OPEX at this time, they are reducing a little bit for, of course, following this health crisis that we are worldwide feeling. You expect that as soon as we have solved this health crisis, we will return to invest in a huge amount here in Brazil again?
I believe that the result is very competitive when we do the comparison with other areas. And what we have seen recently is that break-even costs are going down very quickly. I remember 2015, 2016, we used to hear that pre-salt break-even was in the range of $55, $60. I remember when I joined the agency, the first OTC I went in Houston. Probably most of my friends in Bratecc, they were there at that time. It was May 2017. There was a presentation from Petrobras about the Libra project. And they showed that they expected to have Libra with $35 per break even. I don't remember if you remember that. That happened in 2017 in May. A few months, 2 months later, I went to the World Petroleum Congress in Istanbul, in Turkey. And there was a panel. And in this panel, it was moderated by Daniel Jürgen, the famous guy from the Prize, wrote the book, The Prize, the Pulitzer Prize. And it was me and Patrick Pouyanné, the CEO of Total. And to my complete surprise, I tell you that, he told me that he expected the pre-salt break-even in Santos Basin in the range of $20 a barrel.
35 to 20.
In a matter of 2 months, I saw those 55 reduced to 35 by Petrobras, and then to 20 as an expectation from Total. And what the last number I saw from Libra and Petrobras, public announcement from Petrobras, if I'm not mistaken, is 29. And if you see some presentations that Petrobras had from last year, December, I believe, they said that their break-even was in the range of 25, going to $21 a barrel. So it's in the range of what the CEO of Total was saying 3 years ago. So in the range of $20 a barrel, it's really competitive.
Yeah, really competitive. Yeah, great numbers. Decio, some executives commented this week on a price projection for barrel, 25 in this year, growing to 35 in 22. Of course, it's a complicated issue to predict a price, of course, but what are the scenarios you can see for price in the short and long term?
Well, no one will ever be certain about the oil price, but we have seen some tendency in the past years. I think the last few years, decades, last 20 years, we have seen a series of very relevant events when you think about the oil price. You remember the crisis in the 70s, and then the second oil crisis in the end of the 70s, and then we started the 80s with a very high price. And all of a sudden in 86, as a result of increasing production offshore especially, North Sea, Campos Basin, Gulf of Mexico, we have seen the oil price depressed, very depressed, from 86 onwards. And then in the years 2000, approximately, in the end of the 90s, we have seen China emerging as a market. And when we saw the need to produce oil from more expensive provinces, we have realized that probably oil price will never go down until we had the revolution in the US, the shale oil revolution. And the shale oil revolution put a cap on the oil price, which was the price needed to develop all those almost infinite reserves, not reserve resources, let's call it this way. So at that point, we saw that oil price, they had a bottom, which was the OPEX to extract conventional oil, and a ceiling, which was the price needed to incentivize production on the shale. What we did not count, or we did not count completely, was technology. The technology act to decrease the cost of oil. So the cost of oil the cost to produce oil start decreasing. So we are now in a situation in which oil price, they bottom at levels in which we stop producing because conventional oil is no longer profitable. But when it reached a certain level that stimulates production in the shale or other provinces like the pre-salt or some more the offshore regions, there is no lack of oil. Our problem is not production anymore. Our problem is demand. And what we see in front of us now in the short term is an enormous reduction in demand that shall impact the demand in the short, medium, and long terms. So I do expect that oil price will move in the range between what we have seen now, $30, $40, $50 in the years to come, and maybe higher than that, but in the long run.
Perfect. Decio, the world is 100 million barrels a day production range at this time. A little bit less because, of course, we have less demand, so the production must be less too. In Brazil, is around 3 million barrels a day production, but exporting almost 1 million barrels for several places. But at the other side, we have an importation of 400,000 barrels of diesel and other components. So it is a good equation that we export crude oil and import diesel. Why?
It's not, but it's the reality. And it's a very difficult reality to change. Because we exported by December 2019, 1.1 million barrels. Petrobras alone exported in April 1 million barrels a day. More than 1 million barrels a day. 30.4 million barrels in April. It's something that if we imagine that a few years ago, probably we won't believe that anticipation. But the issue is that demand in Brazil has grown, but the refining capacity has not. So there is an imbalance now between the capacities in Brazilian refineries and the consumption. We import diesel oil and gasoline about 20-30%. We import LPG about 30%, 20% of consumption, and most of the petrochemical naphtha, which is gasoline, basically. Those are the main, and a little bit of jet fuel as well. So those are the main import products that we have in Brazil. In order to change that, there is just one way to do it. Is increase refining capacity. And that's very difficult because there is excess capacity worldwide. It's very difficult to develop a large and expensive projects to build the refineries. So I believe that we're going to see in Brazil in years to come projects for development of small refineries, some niche refineries. And also, if Petrobras goes ahead with the divestment program, I believe that the companies which acquire Petrobras refineries, they will make certain and specific investments in order to increase capacity or to improve the quality of product. So we'll see some movement in the refinery sector. But it's difficult to anticipate that we're going to see Brazil self-sufficient in derivatives. I believe if we see that, it will take some time.
And sometimes maybe for specific items, more technological item that we cannot have the good specification, maybe, no?
Yeah, there are some projects that they can be resumed. The refinery in Pernambuco, the Renest, I always heard that the second part of the refinery is the most profitable project in the refinery sector in Brazil. So probably, if there is an interest in investing in that project, probably will be the first one. There was the Compares project in Rio de Janeiro, but that's news I have on that. As Petrobras is planning to abandon the project. So if they do that, self-sufficient will be more difficult to reach.
So in terms of energy transition perspective, from system based on fossil fuels and trying to be to renewable energies, how Brazil is in this process of energy transition, and you see that the world will, let's say, postpone the energy transition because this scenario of these times?
I think that what we have seen during the last decades indicates that. But we don't know because we have seen a lot of movements from stakeholders and from companies showing that maybe it will be different this time. We had in Brazil, you remember the Pro-Álcool, which was a program to replace gasoline with ethanol in the 70s. And the project was successful until the 90s, when the oil price was so low, the gasoline price was so low that we almost abandoned the consumption of ethanol. And lately, with the flex fuel engine and this new situation in which the oil price start increasing again, we have seen a rebirth of the ethanol industry in Brazil. So for renewables, low oil price is always an enemy because it makes much more difficult to replace. But there is something that is new, is that rate of return in renewables normally was lower than in oil projects. So the majors, they had the trend to prefer investing in oil projects. But now with the probably oil price lower, returns in oil projects will be closer to the returns in the renewable. And then we add to that this new trend that stakeholders all over the world, especially in Europe, they are forcing companies to go in the direction of the energy transition. We have seen recently in the past few months a series of European companies saying that they want to be carbon neutral by 2050. We heard that from Repsol, from Shell, from BP, from Total, from Eni, if I'm not mistaken. So all those movements, they probably will have an impact. So I believe that this time we'll see investments from the majors, especially growing in the renewables. That's what I have seen in articles and talking to people in the industry, especially in solar and wind, offshore wind. In Brazil, we have the ethanol industry, which is very powerful, very important for the country. So it is a different story.
The investors for oil and gas sector and for renewables sometimes are the same or they are totally different in Brazil?
I wouldn't say totally different, but I would say they are basically different. With the companies that invest here in the renewables industry, ethanol, wind, solar, they are not oil companies. Petrobras tried, you remember that, to invest in biodiesel, in ethanol mills, even in made some agreements with Total and Equinor to develop some solar or wind energy, but they are focusing in the pre-salt. So I would say that in Brazil, the investors that invest in renewables are different, with a few exceptions. We see guys like BP and Shell investing in ethanol. We see some of those guys, Equinor, Shell, Total, investing in solar and wind in Brazil as well, but in minors investment. You do not compare with the investment they had in the oil sector.
Oil sector, totally different. Excellent. We appreciate having Decio Oddone with us today, and let's pray to the end of this crisis and we come to have a coffee together physically.
Oh, for sure. I hope so. And that happens soon, I hope.
So, excellent. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Good day for all.
Thank you. A pleasure being with you. Bye-bye.
You too.